I need a break. Whew. Hello, and thank you for joining me on this slightly different episode. I'll get into why I'm sitting next to a 60-plus-year-old oscilloscope at the end, but first I wanted to give you a quick update on the projects in the garage. It's been a few days since I did the carburetor refresh that you saw on the Bellett, and well, it still is running great, but it seems to be sneezing or coughing up through the carburetors at really light throttle. And this is apparently indicative of a lean condition, so there's a good chance that either the spacers between the carburetor and the intake manifold are leaking, or the pilot jet is too small. Either way, I've got new insulators on order and new pilot jets, so I will get to tuning those and hopefully get that running perfect. Now, it is important to note that when you're caning it, when you're on it hard, it's running beautifully, as well as we saw as it was slipping and sliding all over the driveway. The next project that I want to get to is the Austin Healey, and for the most part, it's running beautifully. It will go and turn amazing. It just won't stop. So the brake master cylinder, I believe, has leaked out all of the brake fluid. The front calipers have actually recently been rebuilt, and the rear drum brakes look totally dry. So it kind of limits it to the brake master cylinder or the brake booster. Either way, we're gonna have to get it up in the air, get the wheels off of it, get underneath it, and see what the problem is. While we're working on that, there is some maintenance that I wanna do on both the Honda Beat and the Isuzu Gemini. The Honda Beat needs a new boot on one of the CV axles. Now, the CV axle itself is not clicking, so it's still good, but the boot has torn and the grease has kind of flown out. The Isuzu Gemini, well, it's just, I don't drive it, so it needs to get a serious wash, and ultimately it will go up for sale. I have someone who's interested in it, but if that falls through, it will be going up on a site like Bring a Trailer or something like that. And hopefully I can use the money from selling that to fund some of the other interesting projects. And speaking of other interesting projects, the next big one that I'm working on is the 117 Coupe, and I am doing an engine swap on it. Originally it came with a G180Z, which was a little single cam cross flow head, 1.8 liter, made about 95 horsepower. And even though that engine was available in some cars here in the States, finding parts for it is becoming almost impossible. And the engine that I'm putting in is a Mazda Miata 1.8. Should make about 140 horsepower, so that's a pretty good bump in power. I'm also bringing over the 5-speed from the Miata. I've got everything mocked up. I had a custom oil pan built for it to clear all of the weird setup that's going on underneath the 117, and I should be able to get the motor and transmission in such a way that doesn't require any modification to the 117 body. So this will hopefully ultimately end up as a bolt-on modification, meaning that you could just unbolt everything, put the original engine back in, and everything would go back to purely original. And of course, next to the 117, we have the beautiful Mazda Cosmo. This is a long-term project that I've had. It's been kind of just sitting in storage ever since I moved back from Japan, because I just am a little scared of working on it. It's just too nice. But it's an absolute shame for it to not get running. So once I get caught up on some of the other projects, maybe once I get the engine in the 117, we're gonna dive into the Cosmo really hard. I do have most of the parts for this, most of the new old stock stuff. I even have the original engine and transmission. The 10A engine is going to require a full rebuild. There's zero compression in it. But that is a project that is kind of sitting after the 117. And after the 117 is out and on its own, that will also open up a bay for another car to come down. I have 3 more cars that I would really like to work on. One of them is my 1988 Nissan 300ZX SS. And I bought this car when I was 18 and I've had it ever since. So I've never owned anything longer than I have owned this car. I am very Sad that it has fallen into the state of disrepair that it is. It will still start up and run if you put a new battery in it, but it does not run well. The engine still feels like it has good compression, the turbo still makes excellent boost, but everything on this engine is controlled via vacuum lines, and those have pretty much all deteriorated. So the engine is probably going to need to come out regardless. And well, if the engine's out, I should probably rebuild it. And if I'm rebuilding it, I should probably use the VG33 that's sitting over in the corner. So we'll bump it up to a 3.3 liter. Maybe I can find myself a T3 turbo. And I'm aiming for an engine bay that looks 100% original, but makes about 280 horsepower. But again, it's pretty far down the list. Now, after the Z31, I want to get to work on the S30 Fairlady Z. This is a genuine right-hand drive Fairlady Z that was imported in about 1973, 1974, I believe. When I got it, it was rusty and not in excellent shape. So I stripped it down to start a restoration, and then I hopped on a plane and moved to Japan for the next 8 years. So it got kind of pushed back into the corner. And well, I picked up a bunch of other project cars while I was living in Japan, so it just keeps getting pushed further down the roster. But these S30s keep going up in value, so I need to get on restoring this before the parts become so expensive that I can't afford to restore it anymore. And finally, we have this sad 1967 or 68, I believe, Mercedes-Benz 280 SL. This was actually my uncle's car, and well, it kind of fell into disrepair long before he passed, and then when he passed, we got it, and we've had it for the last 25 to 30 years, and well, it's just kind of getting worse and worse. It needs a ton of metal work. There's really no way to bring this thing back to original quality without spending more money than it would be to just buy one that's already fully restored. So it opens up an interesting avenue to where if we did the metal work and we got the body solid and looking somewhat decent, I think it would be a perfect candidate for a full drivetrain swap. Maybe slap in some Miata subframes, maybe slot in an American V8 or something, and build something absolutely ridiculous that still looks very, very cool. But that is extremely long-term projects. There's years of projects that are in line before it. Other than that, you may be wondering why I'm sitting in a room with a oscilloscope from the 1950s that is purely vacuum tube powered. And well, that's because I have, like many of you, more than one hobby. Classic cars, particularly Japanese classic cars, has been a long hobby of mine, but also vintage electronics have been a long hobby of mine. And in particular, I've gotten really heavy into vacuum tubes lately. So I actually have a different YouTube channel called Usagi Electric, where I work on vintage electronic components. This HP 150A, for example, I stripped all the way down, did a full restoration on it, got it calibrated, and it's working beautifully. I have more HP equipment that needs restoration. I've slowly been working on building up a vacuum tube computer, and it is massive. So if any of that sounds like it might be of interest to you, hop over to Usagi Electric, maybe give it a follow, check out some of the videos I do over there. But that, I think, brings everything up to speed. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episodes.